The humid air over Elmwood Creek felt like a wet blanket soaked in exhaust fumes. It was the third summer of the drought, but the heat wave breaking over the valley was something biblical. The community pool had been shut down, the reservoirs were skeletal, and the only color in the suburban landscape was the shimmering mirage off the black asphalt. Leo Vance, 14 years old and already carrying the resentment of 1,000 canceled plans, knew the rule: no unauthorized recreation on non-HOA property. He also knew the risk was worth it. He found it 3 weeks ago, the decommissioned municipal water tank. A leviathan of riveted steel, 3 stories tall, rusting behind a chain-link fence on the forgotten edge of the greenbelt, a silent monument to a thirstier, wetter past. Inside, the massive, open cistern, designed to hold 1,000,000 gallons, now held perhaps 5,000, collected from years of condensation and the occasional rogue thunderstorm. The water was dark, cold, and clean, sheltered from the sun and the dust. It was a secret inverted lake. Leo hauled the fence back with a piece of scavenged rebar, creating a gap just wide enough. He led his sister Maria, 12, and their neighbor, Jamie, into the gloom. The first splash was a muted echo in the cavernous space. Maria burst into hysterical laughter, the sound ringing off the steel walls like chimes. "It's like diving into the midnight sky," she shrieked, kicking up a plume of icy water. The light filtering in from the single circular access hatch far above fractured the surface into liquid silver. The air smelled of metallic ozone and pure, unadulterated freedom. For that moment, the oppressive heat, the sticky house, the tension clouding their mother's face, all of it simply ceased to exist. This was their sanctuary. The second week, they were bolder. Leo found a length of rope and tied it to a crossbeam, creating a makeshift swing. The leap, the split second of soaring through the vast, cool air, and the final, shocking immersion, it was a drug. They were reckless and loud, believing the massive structure itself was their shield, muffling their ecstatic cries from the ordered, oppressive world outside. They were wrong. Carol Vandelay didn't need volume to hear an infraction. She heard disorder. She lived directly across the greenbelt, in a house so immaculate its existence felt like a personal critique of all surrounding properties. Carol had never worked a day outside the Elmwood Creek development, yet she carried the self-appointed weight of the municipal code, having served 3 consecutive terms on the HOA's Architectural and Aesthetics Committee. Her life was defined by the strict geometric lines of the community bylaws. On day 21, Carol was pruning her prize-winning black Baccara roses, a dark, almost black variety which seemed perfectly suited to her grim disposition. The sun was setting, casting long, punitive shadows. That's when she heard it, a sound she recognized instantly, a sound out of place, the metallic squeak of a rusted hinge, followed by a distinct, joyous, non-compliant splash. Carol lowered her shears. Her thin lips tightened into a single, colorless line. She walked swiftly to her study, where she kept the Elmwood Creek Rules and Regulations binder, cross-referenced and tabbed, resting beside a municipal-grade camera with a powerful zoom lens. She didn't call the HOA management immediately. Carol believed in documentation. She spent 15 minutes framing the shots, the breach in the fence, the 3 silhouetted forms splashing within the derelict structure, the proximity of the tank, Site 4, Section B, Sublot 19 to the primary utility easement. She took wide shots and tight shots. She was building a case, not reporting a nuisance. The next day, Leo found the laminated, brightly colored notice zip-tied to the fence. The headline screamed in 72-point font, "Warning, trespass, hazardous activity." Below it, a neatly typed, itemized list of violations, cited chapter and verse, ending with the chilling phrase, "Immediate remedial action required. Failure to comply will result in escalating fines and potential litigation." It was signed not by the HOA, but by Carol Vandelay, Secretary, Elmwood Creek Bylaws Review Committee. Leo ripped it down, his face hot with a mixture of fear and pure teenage indignation. "She's not even the right person," he spat at Maria. "She's just some crazy lady with a label maker." But Leo, what if it's true? Maria whispered, her hand trembling slightly. The fun was suddenly coated in something gritty and cold. It's just water, Maria. It's just a tank, Leo said, forcing a confidence he didn't feel. She wants us to be miserable. We're not going to let her. They went back, but the joy was diminished, tinged with paranoia. They kept looking up at the high-access hatch, expecting to see her face silhouetted against the sky. The inevitable confrontation occurred on Saturday afternoon. Sarah Jenkins, Leo and Maria's mother, was working her double shift at the hospital laundry, navigating the endless tide of soiled sheets and emergency scrubs. She was exhausted, financially threadbare, and reliant on her high-interest mortgage and the fragile goodwill of the community. She had told the kids, stay inside, play board games, do anything that doesn't cost money or draw attention. At 3:17 p.m., a pristine white HOA-branded golf cart, driven not by an HOA employee, but by Carol Vandelay in a crisp white visor, pulled up silently beside the chain-link fence. Carol had a clipboard, a pair of dark designer sunglasses that hid her eyes, and a terrifying neutral expression. She had waited until the peak of their playtime. Children, Carol's voice was amplified by a small handheld megaphone, sharp and totally devoid of warmth. Your recreation time is now over. Step out of the structure immediately. Leo, waist-deep in the cool water, felt the adrenaline surge. He knew he had to protect Maria. Jamie scrambled to the far side, terrified. Who are you? Leo shouted back, his voice echoing fiercely. He climbed onto the rope swing platform, towering over the water, wet and defiant. I am a representative of the Elmwood Creek Homeowners Association, exercising the enforcement authority vested in me by Section 4, subsection G, of the Covenant for the Preservation of Community Value, Carol droned. She lifted the camera and snapped a rapid series of pictures. You are engaging in reckless endangerment, property damage, and violation of Health and Safety Code 22A, which governs stagnant water accumulation. It's not stagnant. It's clean, Maria yelled, forgetting her fear in a flash of anger. It's the only place that's cool. Carol lowered the megaphone slightly, revealing the thin, cruel twist of her mouth. The rule is not about the cleanliness of the water, child. It's about the integrity of the covenant. This structure is condemned. It is not an amenity. You are in violation. She raised the megaphone again. The time for compliance is now past. I am now documenting a Level 3 incident. Leo took a deep breath, water dripping from his chin. He looked down at the dark, deep water and then out at the manicured, dull world Carol represented. He knew a retreat now meant surrendering their summer, their dignity, and potentially opening his mother up to a fine. You want to talk about rules? Leo yelled, pushing his soaked hair back. The tank is outside the official HOA boundary, lady. I looked it up. It's county land. You have no jurisdiction here. A genuine flicker of surprise crossed Carol's face, instantly replaced by a predatory calm. Did you? How resourceful. Unfortunately, the violation is attached to the residents' usage and access of the adjacent greenbelt, not the structure itself. Your mother is responsible for your actions. Carol stepped back, turning her full attention to her clipboard. I'm issuing a non-compliance fine of $500 immediately payable. A notice of delinquency will be posted on her door by end of business today. She didn't wait for a response. She simply signed the form with a flourish, placed it back on her clipboard, and drove the golf cart away, leaving behind the acrid smell of hot tires and the chilling echo of the fine. Leo dropped back into the water, the shock replacing his anger. $500. That was a week of his mother's pay, perhaps 2 months of their grocery budget. That was a mountain of sheets she would have to fold. Sarah Jenkins got the text 3 hours later. It was a digital copy of the Level 3 incident report, followed by a separate email titled, Final Warning, Immediate Site Remediation Required. She pulled into the driveway, her body aching, her mind already consumed by the debt. Leo and Maria were sitting on the porch steps, clean, silent, and looking up at her with expressions of profound guilt. The tank, Leo choked out. We're so sorry, Mom. Sarah didn't yell. She looked at the $500 figure on the phone screen, and her world simply narrowed to a point of panic. Get inside, she commanded, her voice dangerously flat. She opened the door to find the official HOA notice already plastered to the wood. A bold, red envelope containing the fine due in 48 hours. She peeled it off, hands shaking. She was halfway to the kitchen when her phone rang. It was an unknown number, but the caller ID showed the letters HOA Central Office. She answered, her voice tight. "Mrs. Jenkins? This is Arthur Wells, Managing Director," a formal, slick voice stated. "Regarding the incident reported by Ms. Vandelay." "I understand," Sarah whispered, clutching the counter. "The fine? I'll figure out how to pay it, but my children were only—" "The fine is standard, Mrs. Jenkins," Wells interrupted, his tone chillingly professional. "However, there is a more significant matter regarding the tank, Site 4, Sublot 19. Sarah closed her eyes, preparing for a threat of property lien or high. The sudden blinding floodlight was a physical blow. It didn't just illuminate Leo. It pinned him against the night, stripping away the last vestige of the anonymity he had enjoyed inside the tank. The air crackled with the silent, undeniable reality of the new rules of engagement. This was no longer a simple confrontation, but a documented siege. Leo shielded his eyes, the high-powered LED beam a razor-sharp blade across the dark greenbelt. He could just make out the silhouette of Carol Vandelay's pristine bay window across the way, a dark shape against the softer glow of her interior lights. He knew she was watching, possibly with binoculars, enjoying the checkmate. The setup was too perfect, too instantaneous to be coincidental. The light, the camera, the clean patch of dirt under the rumored valve. She hadn't just reported them. She had prepared for them. He took 2 steps back into the deeper shadow of an oak tree, his heart pounding a furious rhythm against his ribs. He understood the message. Come back here, and every move will be recorded, every action interpreted as criminal intent. The thought of Maria's small hand on a valve near the foundation, the memory of his mother's ashen face, drove a spike of cold dread into his gut. Leo crept back to the house, slipping into the laundry room. He found his mother, Sarah, sitting at the kitchen table, the 2 HOA papers spread out like evidence on a crime scene. She hadn't changed out of her sweaty hospital scrubs. The fatigue was a visible weight on her shoulders, but her eyes, usually kind and slightly worried, were now burning with a fierce, terrified clarity. "Mom," Leo started, his voice barely a whisper. "I saw the light." "Did you hear what that guy on the phone said? About the valve and the tank collapsing?" Sarah looked up, her expression hardening. "Yes, Leo, I heard every word. A $500 fine for swimming and a potential felony charge and destruction of property lawsuit if that tank falls onto her house." She slammed her hand flat onto the table, making the papers jump. "I called the central office back. Wells was gone, but I spoke to a junior clerk. I demanded to know the exact status of that tank. They confirmed it. It's on the demolition list. Structurally unsound, and the collapse threat is real, especially if the runoff valve is compromised. But we didn't touch the valve." "Mom, I swear," Leo insisted, his voice cracking. "Maybe Maria just rattled it?" Sarah leaned forward, her voice low and desperate. "That's what we know, Leo. Carol Vandelay now has an entire surveillance setup pointed at that tank. She has already convinced the HOA director that we are the ones who tampered with it, creating a threat to her property, which just happens to be the most expensive one in the neighborhood. They're using this tank, this rusty relic of the past, as a weapon to control us. This is not about community rules anymore. It's about leverage. So what do? Sarah stood up, pacing the small kitchen. "We pay the fine first. It keeps the initial wolves at bay." She grabbed her car keys. "I'm taking the jewelry I inherited from Grandma to the pawn shop right now. It won't cover all $500, but it buys us time. Then we fight the accusation about the valve." "How?" "She's got the lights and the cameras." "She's got the cameras pointed at the outside," Sarah replied, a sliver of steely resolve entering her voice. "The structural compromise is inside. The collapse isn't triggered by someone touching the handle. It's triggered by the water pressure changing, the rapid drainage." Sarah stopped pacing and fixed Leo with an intense stare. "You know that tank better than anyone. Tell me, where does the water go? If Maria did rattle that valve, is it possible to reseal it? Quietly? Before Carol can manufacture a narrative that we are deliberately trying to flood her backyard, Leo felt a surge of adrenaline, not of fear, but of purpose. This wasn't about swimming. It was an infiltration mission. It drains into the main retention ditch behind the greenbelt, Mom. If the valve is open even a little, the water level will drop slowly. We can check the water level, and if Maria did open it, I can close it. I know exactly where the access points are. We have to do it tonight. Sarah hesitated, her hand hovering near the fine notice. No, absolutely not. The camera is there. She's waiting for you to go back. Then she wins, Mom! She sits there, waits for the water to drop low enough, then calls the cops and says we're trying to collapse the thing. She's got us cornered. We have to prove she's wrong about the valve by making sure the valve is right. A tense silence filled the kitchen. The risk was enormous, a midnight break-in under surveillance facing potential accusations of attempted destruction. But the alternative, sitting still, waiting for Carol's meticulously crafted trap to spring, was worse. Sarah looked at her son, seeing not the reckless boy who cut a fence, but a resourceful young man prepared to defend his family. Okay, she finally whispered, the word heavy with dread and commitment. But we go together. We wait until 1 a.m., she'll be asleep, or at least she'll think we are. We'll approach from the dense woods on the north side, out of the floodlight's direct line of sight. You go in, check the valve, and get out. 5 minutes. No talking, no splashes. The hour felt like 5. At 1:07 a.m., under a sliver of moon, Sarah and Leo moved like ghosts through the woods adjacent to the greenbelt. The air was still thick and oppressive, and the only sound was the rustle of dry leaves underfoot. They reached the perimeter of the chain-link fence. The powerful LED light was a beacon of accusation, casting the giant steel tank in stark, unmoving relief. It looked less like a swimming hole and more like a prison tower. Stay here, near the deepest shadow, Sarah mouthed, pointing to a thicket of overgrown shrubs. If she appears, scream. I'll make a diversion. Leo nodded, his muscles coiled tight with adrenaline. He slipped through the cut in the fence, moving low and fast into the shadow of the tank's immense cylindrical base. The air immediately became cooler, thicker. He could hear the faint, hollow drip, drip, drip of water somewhere in the darkness. He located the valve. It was exactly where he remembered Maria exploring. A small, heavy iron wheel set into a short, rusted pipe, almost completely obscured by years of unchecked ivy. He reached out and cleared the tangle of vines. His heart plummeted. The valve was not completely sealed. It was open a quarter turn, just enough to allow a slow, steady, barely perceptible leak that would drain the tank gradually over days, perhaps weeks, without the dramatic noise of a full release. Maria had inadvertently opened it. The dripping sound was the water, already working. He grasped the heavy iron wheel and began to turn it clockwise. The metal shrieked, a high, piercing screech that cut through the silence of the night like a knife. He winced, turning slower, trying to muffle the sound with his t-shirt, but the rust was unyielding. Screech! 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 He managed 3 full turns, sealing the valve tight. The dripping sound abruptly stopped. The silence that followed was terrifying. He took a shaky breath, ready to retreat when he heard a new sound, the distinct, mechanical whir of an automated camera lens adjusting its focus. The spotlight on Carol's house didn't move, but the little red light on the hidden motion camera at the base of the tank began to pulse rapidly. The camera wasn't just recording. It was now tracking him, reacting to the sound. Then, from Carol's house, an outdoor speaker, previously silent, crackled to life. Infraction B7, vandalism in progress. Carol's amplified voice was calm, metallic, and terrifyingly precise. I see you, Leo Vance. You are attempting to tamper with sealed municipal property. The police are already dispatched. Leo spun, adrenaline flooding his system. The voice was coming not just from her house, but from a separate speaker system mounted on the fence line, trained directly on the tank. He was trapped. He saw his mother, Sarah, emerge from the shadows, her face a mask of terror. Leo, run! Run now! Sarah screamed, rushing towards the cut in the fence. But before Leo could move, Two things happened simultaneously. First, the ground beneath him, already saturated by the slow, days-long leak from the valve, gave way with a sickening squish. He stumbled, looking down to see the earth near the foundation was a muddy, bubbling soup. The slow leak had been eroding the already compromised base. Second, the immense, rusted steel shell of the tank above him groaned, a deep, resonant, metallic sigh of stressed metal. A sound like the ship's hull giving way. Leo looked up. He didn't see the stars. He saw the black, towering curve of the tank against the sky, and he saw a thin spiderweb crack, a dark line that hadn't been there before, extending down from the highest rivet line, right above the waterline. The sudden sealing of the valve had caused an immediate, massive pressure spike against the compromised steel. The weaponization was complete. By trying to fix the valve and stop the leak, he had inadvertently initiated the catastrophic structural failure. Carol's amplified voice boomed one last time, cutting through the night. Witnessed. Sabotage complete. Elmwood Creek Police, arrive at Site 4 immediately. Leo scrambled toward his mother, looking back at the colossal tank. It hadn't collapsed yet, but the crack was growing and the entire structure was subtly, audibly shifting. The first consequence of the conflict was immediate and physical. The simple joy of a splash had metastasized into an imminent, irreversible disaster, and Carol Vandelay had the recording that framed Leo as the architect of the destruction. The scream of metal was the loudest sound Leo Vance had ever heard, a mournful, drawn-out shriek that obliterated the stillness of the suburban night. It was the sound of 1,000,000 pounds of steel and water fighting a losing battle against physics. Sarah Jenkins didn't hesitate. She grabbed Leo's arm, hauling him across the sinking, muddy ground near the tank's base. "Ignore her! Move now!" They scrambled through the gap in the chain-link fence, ignoring the searing beam of Carol Vandelay's floodlight. The air behind them was no longer just cool. It was heavy with the smell of wet earth and ancient rust. As they dove into the shadows of the oak thicket, the immense cylindrical water tank, the locus of their forbidden summer joy, gave a final, terrifying crack. It wasn't the sound of an explosion, but a more insidious, deeper rending. The massive metal structure didn't fall instantly. It began to lean, slowly at first, then accelerating with a horrible, grinding inevitability. The 5,000 gallons of water inside, contained for decades, suddenly surged against the point of failure. The water burst out not as a single flood, but as a violent, pressurized jet from the growing crack, aimed like a cannon directly across the greenbelt. The force of the water didn't travel far before the tank itself buckled. The towering structure began its final, catastrophic descent. It slammed down with a deafening roar and a thunderous, earth-shaking impact. The noise was primal, a mix of crumpling steel, displaced water, and splintering earth. The ground rose in a cloud of dust and steam. The sheer sound was enough to trigger car alarms for blocks in every direction, turning the quiet suburban street into a chaotic, shrieking symphony of fear. Sarah covered Leo, her body shielding his, both of them choking on the sudden dust cloud. They heard the frantic, closer sound of tires skidding on asphalt. The Elmwood Creek Police were arriving. When the dust began to settle, Leo pushed himself up. He didn't need to look. He already knew. The colossal cylinder of the tank now lay on its side, a massive, crumpled snake of rusted steel. And where the jet of water had been aimed directly across the perfectly manicured greenbelt, the devastation was absolute. Carol Vandelay's house. The prized, immaculate corner property was not merely damaged. It was structurally obliterated on one side. The impact zone was precisely where the tank had fallen, crushing the front deck, garage, and a significant portion of the main facade. The jet of water had excavated a miniature canyon through her award-winning black baccarat roses and her front lawn. Lights were snapping on all over the neighborhood. Doors were opening. The sudden silence after the crash was almost as loud as the collapse itself. The police cruiser was the first vehicle on the scene. Two officers, flashing red and blue strobes, painting the destroyed tank in lurid, sick colors, were already running towards the wreckage. "Mom, we have to go," Leo urged, pulling on Sarah's arm. "She recorded me. She knows we were here." "Too late," Sarah said, her voice numb. She was staring at the police lights reflecting off the mangled tank. Running now makes us guilty of sabotage and fleeing the scene. We stand here. We tell the truth. A shrill, hysterical shriek cut through the sirens. Carol Vandelay, now dressed in a hastily thrown-on robe, burst out of her undamaged back door, emerging around the side of her house to survey the scene. She was no longer the composed secretary of the bylaws committee. She was a woman whose fortress had been violated and destroyed. She didn't look at the officers. She looked straight across the wreckage, her eyes locking onto Sarah and Leo. "There they are!" Carol screamed, pointing a trembling finger right at them. They were sabotaging the valve. "They did this on purpose. I have the video evidence. Arrest them!" Officer Rodriguez, the more seasoned of the two, approached Sarah and Leo, his hand resting on his sidearm. "Ma'am, stay calm. Did you witness the collapse?" Sarah stepped forward, her body trembling, but her stance firm. "Officer, my name is Sarah Jenkins. My son Leo and I were near the fence when the tank fell. It was an accident. The structure was condemned. It was already failing." Carol rushed up behind the officer, shoving a cell phone screen into his face. The video was shaky, illuminated by the floodlight. It showed Leo's shadow grappling with the valve, followed by the terrifying screech of the rusted metal turning. "Accident?" Carol spat, her face contorted with fury and the shock of the near-fatal experience. "Look at the timestamp. Look at him tampering with the runoff valve just moments before the collapse. This was targeted vandalism and attempted assault. I told the HOA he was unstable. He was trying to drain it and destabilize it so it would fall on my home." Leo, unable to stay silent, yelled back, "No! I was closing it. It was leaking. I was trying to fix it. The leak was undermining the foundation." The junior officer, Miller, was now surveying the site. He looked at the massive, catastrophic damage, the shattered windows, the twisted steel resting like a dead giant on Carol's former garage. The scene screamed malicious intent, not accidental failure. Officer Rodriguez ignored Leo and addressed Sarah coldly. "Ma'am, your son's own testimony is that he was manipulating a valve on a condemned, pressurized municipal structure immediately before it collapsed. And you were with him. We have a clear witness and documented video evidence of attempted sabotage. You are both under suspicion." He didn't need to say more. The reality of the situation was crushing. The sheer scale of the destruction negated any complex explanation about compromised structure or accidental leaks. Carol's simple damning narrative, "I saw them touch the tank, then the tank fell on my house," was winning. Within the hour, the scene was chaos. Sirens blared, fire trucks arrived to douse the remaining embers of the damaged electrical wiring, and a news van from a local affiliate pulled up, its satellite dish unfolding like a metallic flower. Sarah and Leo were seated in the back of the cruiser, not under arrest yet, but detained. They watched as Carol Vandelay, miraculously unharmed, gave a tearful, dramatic interview to the news camera, pointing across the crime scene to the crumpled tank and then toward the police cruiser where Sarah and Leo sat. "This is what happens when people violate the sanctity of a planned community," Carol sobbed into the microphone. "These people knew the rules. They chose to escalate. They were reckless, and they destroyed everything I worked for. I demand justice. I demand they be held accountable for this act of terrorism against our neighborhood." The word terrorism echoed through the Greenbelt, a deliberate escalation of language that sealed their fate in the court of public opinion. Sarah looked at Leo, her face etched with a mix of despair and cold fury. "She's not even hurt. She's just playing a part. But her part is going to cost us everything, Leo." Suddenly, Officer Rodriguez returned to the cruiser and opened Sarah's door. His expression had shifted from suspicious to deeply troubled. "Mrs. Jenkins, we have to ask you to come with us to the station to give a formal statement. But before we do, there's something we found, or rather, didn't find, at the site." He paused, then pulled a clear, evidence-bagged item from his pocket. It was a small, high-quality digital camera. This was recovered right near the tank's base, embedded in the mud by the impact, Rodriguez explained, looking not at Sarah, but at the collapsed tank. "It's the motion-activated camera Ms. Vandelay had set up. She claimed it recorded your son tampering with the valve." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. "And did it?" Rodriguez shook his head, his eyes avoiding hers. The camera's SD card was missing. It appears to have been removed before the collapse, not damaged by it. It's a clean ejection. He let the implication hang in the air. Carol Vandelay had not just recorded the sabotage, she had engineered the final, damning piece of evidence by removing the card after Leo turned the valve. But before the structural failure and the police arrival, this meant she controlled the narrative completely. She had the video of Leo touching the valve, but no video of the consequences. The growing crack, the leak stopping, the screech of the tank under pressure, or the moment she activated the speaker and alerted them. She planned this, Sarah whispered, finally understanding the depth of the betrayal. She saw the leak. She let it undermine the foundation, and she waited until Leo, the only person who knew how to reseal it, showed up on camera. Then she took the card and initiated the call. She didn't want the evidence of the structural failure. She only wanted the evidence of Leo's hand on the valve. Officer Rodriguez looked at Sarah, a flicker of doubt in his eyes, but the evidence was overwhelming. Right now, Mrs. Jenkins, what we have is a collapsed pressurized structure, thousands of gallons of water, a destroyed home, and a video of your son manipulating the failure point. We need to find that card. He closed her door, leaving Sarah and Leo sitting in the cruiser, watching the news camera pivot from Carol's sobbing face to the ruins of her home. The full, shocking irony of the situation settled over them. They had been trying to prevent a leak and an accident, but their very attempt at correction had been deliberately turned into the ultimate documented crime. The collapse of the tank was not the end of the conflict. It was the major turning point, transforming a petty HOA dispute into a potential felony charge that could ruin their family forever. The precinct air was thick with the sterile, stale scent of disinfectant and old paper. Sarah Jenkins sat across a battered metal table from Officer Rodriguez, the stark reality of their situation pressing down on her like the crushed steel of the tank. Leo was being interviewed by a social worker and a different, younger officer in the next room, separated only by a wall of smudged glass. Mrs. Jenkins, we've reviewed the footage Ms. Vandelay provided from her phone, Officer Rodriguez stated, his voice professional but tired. It clearly shows Leo near the valve, just before the collapse. Regardless of his intent, which you claim was to seal a leak, the fact is he was tampering with a pressurized, condemned structure. And the result is a destroyed home. And the missing SD card? Sarah countered, gripping the edge of the table. You said yourself it was removed before the crash. That makes her entire narrative a lie. She wanted the collapse to happen. She wanted my son to take the blame. Rodriguez sighed, running a hand over his face. Intent is almost impossible to prove, Mrs. Jenkins. What we can prove is that she was home, that she witnessed the event, and that her house is now totaled. She has clear standing as a victim. You, on the other hand, have a son who trespassed, received a warning, and then returned at 1 a.m. to manipulate the exact component that caused the failure. Without that SD card, which she claims was lost in the chaos, your story about trying to fix the leak is just a defense, not evidence. Sarah leaned forward, her eyes locked on his. She controlled that tank for weeks, officer. She knew about the compromised foundation from her contacts at the HOA. She saw the slow leak, and she realized the opportunity. She let it weaken the ground, set up her lights, waited for Leo to try and correct his mistake, and then she pulled the actual footage that shows the moment she set the trap. She's not a victim. She's an operator. And the video we do have, the one showing Leo, proves she was right to be watching him, Rodriguez finished, effectively shutting down the debate. We're recommending charges of criminal mischief, reckless endangerment, and trespassing be filed against your son. The door opened, and an impeccably dressed, severe-looking woman entered, flanked by a man in a rumpled suit. This was Brenda Thorne, the HOA's legal counsel, and Arthur Wells, the managing director Sarah had spoken to earlier. Wells avoided Sarah's gaze. Thorne dropped a thick leather briefcase onto the table. She didn't acknowledge Sarah or the officer. We are representing Carol Vandelay and the Elmwood Creek Homeowners Association. Officer, we need to expedite the filing of charges. We're also issuing a cease and desist order against Mrs. Jenkins and her minor children, effective immediately, barring them from all Elmwood Creek common areas and the disputed Site 4 property. She finally looked at Sarah, her expression devoid of sympathy. "Mrs. Jenkins, the structural damage estimate to Ms. Vandelay's home alone exceeds $600,000. The cost of environmental cleanup, tank demolition, and utility repair is another $350,000. The HOA will be filing a 9-figure civil suit against you for the entirety of the damages. Furthermore, we are initiating foreclosure proceedings on your home pursuant to Section 8, subsection D, which mandates eviction for residents who cause catastrophic damage to the community infrastructure." The words landed like physical blows. The fine had been $500. The total liability was now nearing $1 million. Coupled with the immediate threat of homelessness and criminal charges for her son, Sarah stood up, her control snapping. "You know this tank was compromised?" "Wells, you confirmed it. You're letting her destroy a family to cover up the HOA's negligence in leaving a structurally unsound hazard sitting on county land." Wells finally looked up, his face pale. "Mrs. Jenkins, I misspoke. My previous statements were based on unverified reports. The tank was structurally sound. Your son's actions caused the failure. We have the video evidence. The HOA's position is clear. You are liable." Thorne opened her briefcase and slid a heavy stack of papers toward Sarah. It was a formal writ of intent to foreclose. "You have 72 hours to vacate the property." "Mrs. Jenkins," Thorne stated flatly, "and I strongly advise you to obtain counsel. This is far beyond a simple community rule violation. This is a matter of catastrophic liability." Later that morning, Sarah found herself navigating the familiar landscape of her life, which now felt alien and hostile. She picked up Maria from the neighbor's house, who was pointedly avoiding eye contact, and drove home. The house was already marked. A small orange municipal sticker was affixed to the front door, stating, "Property under review, HOA enforcement action initiated." Inside, Maria was inconsolable. "It's my fault, Mom," she sobbed, clutching her mother. "I remember touching the wheel. I thought it was a handle to open a secret door. I didn't know." "It's not your fault, honey," Sarah said, hugging her tight, fighting back her own despair. "It's Carol's fault. She set a trap. And we walked into it. She knew the legal system was about evidence and perception, and Carol Vandelay controlled both. The only piece of evidence that could save them, the missing SD card, was in Carol's possession, or destroyed." But then Leo, sitting quietly at the kitchen table, spoke up. "The SD card might be missing, Mom, but she still recorded everything." Sarah looked at him. "Only the part where you touched the valve, Leo. She cut the rest." "No, I mean the other recording," Leo insisted, pulling his battered smartphone from his pocket. "When I was going in, I kept thinking about the cameras. I didn't trust her, so I did something stupid but maybe smart. I turned on my phone's voice recorder and left it right by the gap in the fence under the ivy near the outdoor speaker. I wanted proof that she was watching us." He hesitated, his thumb hovering over the play button. "It won't have video, but if her outdoor speaker was on, it should have picked up everything she said after I closed the valve. The threats, the exact moment she called the police, maybe even the sound of the collapse itself." Sarah's heart pounded. A recording wouldn't exonerate them from trespassing, but it could introduce exculpatory evidence, proof that Carol's actions were deliberately timed and manipulative, undermining the men's RIA, criminal intent, necessary for sabotage charges. Leo hit play. The small speaker on the phone came alive with static. Then the faint, distorted screech of the rusted valve. Screech, screech, screech. Then Carol Vandelay's voice, amplified and chillingly clear. "Infraction B7, vandalism in progress. I see you, Leo Vance. You are attempting to tamper with sealed municipal property. The police are already dispatched." Then the sudden, earth-shattering boom of the collapse. The sound was deafening on the recording, followed by the immediate whoosh of escaping air and water and the distant wail of sirens. And then, cutting through the chaos, a voice they had not heard before. Not Carol, but Arthur Wells, the HOA director. Speaking rapidly into a cell phone, his voice slightly panicked, his microphone clearly sensitive enough to catch him talking near the collapsed tank. "Yes, the collapse is confirmed. We need to stick to the story, Carol. His tampering caused it. The structural integrity report is confidential. Do not, under any circumstances, mention the 2023 internal audit that marked the foundation as Level 4 risk of imminent failure. Deny knowing about any slow leak. Just keep emphasizing the video of the boy and the valve. The sound clip ended. Silence descended on the kitchen. Maria stared at the phone in shock. Sarah stared at the orange foreclosure sticker on her door. The recorded statement was a major turning point. It wasn't just Carol Vandelay operating. It was the entire HOA directorate using Leo as a shield to cover up their own criminal negligence in ignoring a known, dangerous structural failure. The rules were never about water or even community value. They were about corporate liability and corruption. Sarah looked at Leo, her fear replaced by a cold, burning sense of righteousness. We're not running, and we're not losing this house. Now we fight, and we take down the entire HOA. The kitchen of the Jenkins home had been transformed into a desperate war room. The orange foreclosure sticker on the front door was their 72-hour ticking clock. Sarah had the phone recording of Arthur Wells and Carol Vandelay on continuous loop, a chilling confirmation of the conspiracy that stretched far beyond a simple community spat. This recording is everything. Leo, Sarah whispered, her voice rough with adrenaline and sleeplessness. It proves the HOA knew the tank was a level 4 risk. It proves Wells and Carol coordinated to blame you to cover up their criminal negligence. But it's only audio. To stop the foreclosure and the criminal charges, we need to get this to the right authority now. Sarah's first desperate calls were met with stonewalling. The local police precinct, already swayed by Carol's initial, emotionally charged media narrative told Sarah the audio was likely tampered with and was inadmissible without the physical evidence of the missing SD card. The local newspaper refused to run the story without tangible proof of the 2023 internal audit. The HOA had built a perfect wall of bureaucratic denial around themselves. They won't listen. Mom, Leo stated, pacing the small living room. They believe the clean-cut HOA lawyer over us. We have to show them the audit. The audit is buried. Leo, Wells said it was confidential. It's in the HOA's central office. Probably locked down in a fireproof safe, Sarah replied. Staring at the writ of foreclosure, Maria, silent and pale until now, suddenly looked up. The central office isn't just an office, Mom. It's the old municipal library. Remember? I went to their summer reading program. The office is on the first floor. The basement is where they keep all the really old, dusty records. And they have an old book lift. Sarah stared at her daughter. The HOA central office was housed in a repurposed 1950s municipal building. Most of the building's original infrastructure, including a rarely used, slow, antique utility book lift, was still intact. The solution was reckless, bordering on insane. But the foreclosure deadline left them no legal recourse. We go in tonight, Sarah declared, her voice firm. Not to trespass, but to retrieve evidence that proves our innocence and the HOA's guilt. Leo, you're the scout. Maria, you know the layout. I'm the retrieval team. 11:47 p.m. The HOA central office was dark and silent. Sarah, dressed in dark clothing, watched from the parking lot as Leo, wearing a backpack, scaled the building's exterior fire escape, a route that kept him completely off the property's motion-sensitive ground cameras. He was focused, moving with the quiet precision of a child who had spent his summer navigating a massive, condemned steel tank. He accessed the second-floor window of the old administrative archives, the location Maria had pointed out. A faint, almost imperceptible sound of a window latch being coaxed open drifted down. Inside, Maria, positioned on the ground floor behind a thick row of rhododendrons, used a pair of inherited jeweler's tweezers to gently bridge the contacts on the building's exterior security light circuit, plunging the back alley into temporary darkness. 3 minutes later, Leo was in the first-floor hallway. He located the central records room, a heavy wooden door with a modern keycard lock. But just adjacent to it, recessed into the wall, was the utility book lift. The lift was a small, wire mesh cage the size of a microwave oven. It operated with a massive, loud industrial motor, but it had an override panel in the hall. Leo took out the evidence of their summer, a long piece of the rebar he had used to wedge open the tank fence. He used it to short the circuit on the exterior panel of the book lift. The lift whirred faintly and descended to the basement floor. Target: the HOA's basement archive. Sarah moved from the parking lot, passed the momentarily darkened alley, and slipped into the front door, which Leo had internally chained slightly ajar. She met Leo at the records room door. "Basement is clear." "Book lift is ready," Leo whispered, his eyes shining with the intensity of the mission. "The audit is proof of their guilt." "We get the audit, we stop the foreclosure," Sarah confirmed. Sarah stepped into the hall, placed Leo's cell phone against the wall with the active voice recorder, running a safety protocol, and carefully pressed the send to basement button. The book lift rattled down. The lift came, back up with a dusty, thick, bound document resting inside the mesh cage. Elmwood Creek Municipal Water Infrastructure, 2023 Structural Integrity Audit. Sarah's fingers trembled as she pulled the report out. She flipped immediately to the conclusion section. Written in bold red ink: Site 4 tank, foundation failure imminent, recommended immediate drainage and destruction, failure to act, level 4, risk of catastrophic collapse. The guilt was now tangible. Official and undeniable. "We have it, Leo. We won," Sarah whispered, clutching the document. But the relief was shattered by a new sound. The sharp, sudden click of a security lock engaging, followed by a voice. "You're wrong. Mrs. Jenkins, you just sealed yourselves in." Carol Vandelay stood at the end of the hallway, illuminated by the emergency exit sign, holding a master keycard and a phone. She wasn't alone. Standing slightly behind her, looking pale and furious, was Arthur Wells. "We anticipated your desperation, Jenkins," Carol said, her voice dripping with triumphant satisfaction. "You should have run. Now we have you on film breaking and entering a private facility. The charge is just upgraded to a felony. The foreclosure stands." Wells stepped forward, shaking his head. "You were so close to getting away with just a fine." "Now, Mrs. Jenkins, you leave me no choice." "I'm calling the police. We'll be claiming you broke in to destroy evidence." Sarah's mind raced. Carol had anticipated the break-in. This was the final trap. They were cornered, with the audit in their hands, but the recording of their confession would only confirm the felony. Leo acted instantly. Ignoring his mother's panicked, whispered "No!" He moved to the book lift panel and slammed his hand onto the send to basement button. The lift whirred and dropped. "What are you doing, boy?" Wells bellowed. "Getting a lawyer!" Leo yelled back. Carol scoffed. "You think a lawyer is hiding in the archives?" "No," Leo said, pointing at the lift panel. "But the evidence is." Before Carol could react, Leo grabbed the thick audit document from his mother's hands and stuffed it into the small wire cage. He slammed the wire door shut and pressed the basement button again, then hit the emergency maintenance override. The small motor screamed, and the lift plunged to the basement. "You fool! You just destroyed the evidence!" Carol shrieked, rushing toward the panel. "I didn't destroy it," Leo said, backing up against the wall. "I secured it. You can call the cops on us for B&E, but they'll never take your word over a piece of evidence found by a third party deep inside a municipal archive." Carol and Wells exchanged frantic looks. The audit document was the smoking gun. If they broke into the basement to retrieve it, they would be confirming their own conspiracy. Sarah understood the play. The evidence was now inaccessible to both sides, protected by the very security they had breached. "You can arrest us for breaking in." "Mr. Wells," Sarah said, her voice now calm, authoritative. "But when the police find that audit, which they will when the building opens in the morning, they'll find out you knew about the level 4 risk. They'll find out you let that tank collapse to protect the HOA's bottom line. The civil suit will be against you for reckless homicide, and you will be losing more than your job. You'll be losing your freedom." Wells's face turned a sickly gray. He looked at Carol, whose mask of composure was finally shattering into sheer panic. "Call the police, Arthur!" Carol shrieked. "She's bluffing. Get the keys to the basement!" Wells' hand trembled, hovering between his phone and the keycard reader. He knew the risk. If the police came now, the evidence would be retrieved by a uniformed officer, and the criminal charges would pivot from the Jenkins family to the HOA. In that moment of indecision, The final karmic justice arrived. A piercing, multi-toned alarm erupted from the emergency speaker in the hall, a sound entirely different from the police sirens and car alarms of the previous night. Municipal. Emergency alert. Zone 4 flooding detected. All personnel. Evacuate. Wells dropped his phone. "The basement," he stammered. The water main burst when the tank collapsed. It must have taken out the feeder line. The air around their feet was suddenly thick with the sound of rushing water. The building's power flickered, then plunged the hallway into complete darkness. The emergency lights were barely functional. Carol Vandelay, terrified and obsessed with the missing evidence, shrieked, "The audit! Get the audit!" and blindly scrambled toward the basement door. Wells, however, moved instinctively toward the front exit. "I'm not drowning for that file!" Sarah grabbed Leo and Maria. "Go! Front door!" As they fled the building, the screams intensified. Not sirens this time, but the sound of pure, raw panic. Sarah, Leo, and Maria stood across the street, watching the lights of the building flicker, hearing the distant sound of water gushing. They heard two distinct muffled sounds of a body falling, followed by a sudden, sickening crack. Then silence. The police arrived minutes later, drawn by the municipal flood alarm. They found the HOA central office basement rapidly filling with water. The structural integrity of the old building now critically compromised by the sudden surge. They found Arthur Wells clinging to the front door frame, soaked, terrified, and muttering hysterically about a confit.